Hey, what's up? This is Among Us here. This week, something that is definitely going to appeal to Techwear fans, the Snow Peak and New Balance Tokyo design studio R-C4. This is the latest in a line of Snow Peak and New Balance collabs. The first of this particular silhouette came out at the tail end of 2019. Well, we're back here with a new version. There was also a non-collab version of the R-C4 as well, which was a more sneaker-like design, but these ones, of course, are the mids, looking a lot chunkier here, and also now coming in this all-black colorway, as if the last version, black and blue, wasn't black enough. This is a feature-rich sneaker boot, absolutely packed with different technologies, and it certainly doesn't skimp on aesthetics either, and as a result of that, commands a relatively high price of £270 or $320, so it better be pretty good. Let's take a look. Normally I talk about the look of a shoe first, but with this, every aesthetic detail has some kind of utilitarian or performance-centric feature behind it. So it's not just about a technical aesthetic, there is something behind that too, that of course runs far deeper than the all-black colorway. This thing is a bit bulky, chunky, it's clearly rugged looking, and there's a whole bunch of different features that contribute towards that. There is not a single element of this shoe that feels kind of delicate in any way. The midsole and outsole are super oversized with this split at the back that only emphasizes the thickness at the back of there. These things are going to probably add an inch in height to you, so for all you 5'11" boys out there, this shoe's got you. The outsole has nice thick Vibram lugs which alone say wet weather, rough terrain, grip. Snow Peak is very much a brand associated with the outdoors and camping in particular, so it stands to reason that their sneakers be primed for exactly that kind of environment. Let's look at the upper though. The blend of performance and aesthetics continues with the kinds of materials that are being used here. The front half of the upper and toe box is Cordura nylon ripstop with a real feeling of durability, and the diamond pattern having a slight sheen to it which brings that reinforcement to the forefront visually. The toe cap is further reinforced with cow leather here, which you'll also find at the heel. That leather is actually an upgrade for this release specifically. The old version didn't have this and it's definitely welcome here. It gives a lot of resilience for treacherous terrain where you might find yourself kicking rocks or tree roots by accident, whilst maintaining a level of comfort and certainly that luxury touch that's particularly welcome considering this shoe's price point. But we'll come back to comfort in a bit more detail later, because we've got some more materials to look at. The other primary material used on the upper is neoprene, which you'll find more at the top end of the shoe, over the tongue for example, and around the back towards the ankle too. This of course provides greater comfort to those key areas which are naturally a bit safer from the demands of rough ground, and indeed this neoprene is quite heavily padded at the top of the ankle. At the base of the heel, at the back of the shoe, along with leather, a plastic cage adds stability here and helps lock your foot in. Throughout, these material changes give you a lot to look at from a textural perspective, even when colour-wise it's all tonal. The lace straps on each side and the laces themselves are more areas which contribute to that rugged utilitarian aesthetic. These are fully attached to the shoe, so there's no flapping about and it makes it far stronger. Metal D-rings at the first and the last strap provide further reinforcement whilst having that aesthetic reference to outdoor gear. The laces themselves kinda do this too, with a thick rope-like construction with grey woven in, resembling a blacked out climbing rope. Like everything else on this shoe, they don't feel like they're going to fall apart anytime soon. And it does come with a second pair of grey 3M laces as well if you're feeling fancy, although to be honest, I quite like the default ones. All those things combined and a few other bits like some leather over the tongue here really make this feel like a maximalist shoe. There's certainly a lot to look at. Every single inch of the shoe there is just something different on here, and it's all of those design elements that's allowed the branding of the shoe to take a back seat. Strangely, one of the most prominent things is this tiny little Cordura tag at the top here of the ankle, purely because it's the only non-black thing on the shoe. You've got a few other examples of technologies here which have lent their branding to this shoe. You've got the Gore-Tex logo here on the heel, and below that the end cap reveal logo, which is some of New Balance's premier midsole cushioning technology. Underneath you've got Vibram and Absorb logos here as well, but you're not going to see those too often. There's a woven New Balance at the back here at the heel, but there's one extra piece of branding which I thought was pretty cool, and it's kind of hiding in plain sight. You've got here these straps on each lateral side actually form the New Balance signature N. It's so well integrated with the design though, it doesn't really look like branding at all, so I thought that was a really cool solution to that problem. One tiny other thing, you've got the shoe model embossed on the leather part of the tongue here as well, but that is so subtle, you're not going to see it most of the time. And how could we forget the only piece of Snow Peak branding on this shoe is just at the tip of this strap here, which is, yeah, not too much. They've hardly gone overboard branding-wise with this collab. One of the big aesthetic features though, which is also rooted in performance, is the Fidlock V-buckle that you'll find at the ankle. This is something that's become quite popular in recent years with belts and bag straps in particular, so it definitely feels like a kind of Techwear reference in that sense. But how well is it actually implemented here? I think it certainly looks fine. There's so much else to look at on this shoe that it doesn't really over-centralize things. I just think it sits there pretty nicely. But of course, we gotta know how well it actually works with this implementation. The main benefit of the Fidlock V-buckle is the speed of connection and detachment. With the former, it's definitely not quite as seamless as on a belt, for example, because there's just less travel here. You have to exert a little bit more effort to actually pull the two ends of the buckle together to get them to lock. However, taking this off, disconnecting it, is still super easy. You can just grab this and then pull it off straight away. And that makes the shoe deceptively easy and quick to remove relative to how kind of chunky and protective it looks. They also clearly thought about the tension that this would create, because right around where this strap goes is where the neoprene at the ankle is at its thickest. So despite this, yeah, helping to secure your foot in the shoe, it doesn't actually feel uncomfortable in any way. Comfort in general, I feel, has its ups and downs. It's certainly a very supportive and a very stable feeling shoe, and there's a lot going for it in that regard. You've got that real nice chunky midsole, you've got the big lugs there, you've got of course the materials used as well, with this lacing system that provides a fairly decent tightness as well. I originally purchased these in a UK 11, which would normally be a US 12 or an EU 46. However, New Balance say that that's actually a US 11.5 or an EU 45.5. As a result, I found those a little bit tight, to be honest, so I ended up sizing up and getting a UK 11.5 to fit my US or EU size. So I'd say definitely stick to your regular US or EU size for these, but even then, these are a fairly narrow fitting shoe. So if you've got feet that are on the wider side, I would definitely recommend going half a size up on these. You can of course slacken the laces, which does help a bit because it's really laterally at the midfoot here where these you'll probably notice will be tightest, but there's only a certain amount that can do. The upper, of course, is firmly in sneaker boot territory, but with some appropriate material choices to help these be as comfortable as possible. You've got the greatest reinforcement in the areas that need it, that are most likely going to be seeing the most punishment, over the toe box in particular. But then with Cordura here, in these kind of mid-wear areas, which is, of course, lighter weight, but still very protective. And then up at the top here, where you're probably going to see less physical punishment, they've really focused on comfort with the neoprene areas. Although the Cordura part of the upper does have a little bit of rigidity to it, I didn't find this to be an issue. I still find this relatively comfortable, and the toe box definitely has more movement in it than something like the Feel 2 boot, for example, that I've been wearing a lot on hikes as well. Despite their look too, this is a deceptively light shoe. They feel noticeably less heavy than many of your average hiking boots, and that's mostly thanks to the upper and the Cordura's relatively light weight compared to its strength. A lot of the weight here is coming from this midsole and outsole. Overall though, it certainly didn't feel like it was weighing me down in any way. Thanks to the Absorb foam and the end cap reveal tech, which combined are some of New Balance's premier cushioning technologies, there is certainly a bit of give in these and some cushioning. However, this is combined with the Vibram outsole, which is really designed with durability and grip in mind, and thus is really pretty hard. I particularly noticed this at the back of the outsole on the heel, where this semicircle here kind of feels like it provides some slightly uneven pressure on the back to the point that it really does feel quite noticeable, and this is certainly a better suited shoe to soft ground than walking around on pavement all day. But clearly what's happening here is the fusion of two very separate technologies, so that you're getting some level of cushioning and comfort without sacrificing that grip and durability of the Vibram outsole. I have to admit though that even after wearing these for a couple of hours on a hike where it's mostly soft ground, I still felt that on the heels and the balls of my feet there was definitely a bit of extra pressure there, to the point that my feet were feeling a bit sore by the end. So I certainly wouldn't want to be wearing these on real hard ground anytime soon. I'm hoping that these do kind of break in a bit and they end up being a little bit more comfortable, but certainly at the moment, yeah, wearing these long term, even on soft ground, you definitely do notice that rigidity of the Vibram outsole. The use of Gore-Tex here is pretty appropriate relative to the use case, the kinds of other materials being used here as well, and it only exacerbates that feeling of performance and that ability to take these pretty much anywhere. I walked through some pretty chunky puddles in these and surprisingly came out fine, and I think this is probably my only shoe that would have achieved that. It just shows the use of all these technologies is not just for the sake of adding labels to the box, but to provide genuine utility and performance for the wearer. It does also make this shoe relatively warm as well. That's certainly something that I noticed, and I wouldn't choose this shoe for the height of summer, that's for sure. They do retain heat fairly effectively. As for the price, there's a lot of materials and technologies on offer here which do go some way towards justifying that. You've got Vibram, Cordura, Gore-Tex, all of these third-party things are always going to add cost to a shoe, and especially when you're combining that with the more high-end New Balance technology, specifically Absorb and End Cap Reveal. It being a collab as well is always going to increase the price, that's just a fact, and even aside from those branded technologies, just all these other elements feel pretty sturdy and pretty well constructed. It would be hard to ask for more, really, from a construction perspective. However, considering these are significantly more expensive than New Balance's made in US and made in UK lines, I was a little bit surprised to see these made in China. Not because that's indicative of quality, because, as I say, these are a pretty well constructed shoe, but I just thought that considering the price of these, considering their unique nature, I thought that they would have been made in a facility that New Balance themselves associate with their more premium sneakers. The New Balance R-C4 overall feels like it's got that really good balance between boot and sneaker. It's got a lot of those performance elements, things that are genuinely designed to provide utility, whilst also having a much more sophisticated and a more futuristic look than what we typically expect from a hiking boot. Those performance elements are certainly more than skin deep. There is a lot going on here which does actually work and do the thing that it's supposed to. That does mean, of course, that from a comfort perspective alone, these aren't necessarily the best thing. You know, for walking around in cities and stuff, especially in the middle of summer, I would certainly not be going to these, but if you're thinking more for that cold, wet use, you're out on the trails, you're doing a bit of walking around outside, then something like this is potentially going to be right up your street, particularly if you're into this utilitarian technical aesthetic. From a performance perspective, the priorities have clearly been towards water resistance, stability, grip, durability, all of those kinds of things. And yeah, that does mean that breathability isn't quite as hot. Underfoot comfort as well is certainly not going to match many sneakers, but I am hoping that these kind of break in a bit more over time. I start finding them a bit more comfortable, and yeah, I expect it's just one of those features of a Vibram outsole that hardness is probably something that you'll notice. But as I say, the Absorb foam, the End Cap Reveal goes at least some way towards mitigating that. These are going to be my hiking shoe of choice, I think, at least until it starts getting too warm, and just got to hope that that heel breaks in a little bit. But that's everything on the New Balance R-C4, the Snow Peak collab. Let me know what you guys think of them. Are you a fan of these? Do you think they're too expensive? These certainly are a pretty high price here. Is that going to put you off, or do you think it's worth paying for? And as always, if you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like because it is super appreciated. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and we will be back next week with another video. Shout out to Trolls and everyone else who corrected me that Elliot Emile is in fact Danish and not French. That was my bad. Just because they're both French names or they're used in France, that doesn't mean that he's French. So yeah, apologies for that error. And shout out to Noah, big fan of Bybora. Yeah, definitely hope that I can pick some of that stuff up in the future. I'm going to be keeping my eye out for future releases, that's for sure. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. There's going to be some more going up at the top if you want to check those out. Maybe some more sneaker reviews, something like that. And if you haven't subscribed yet, but you want to see more cool technical stuff like these bad boys, then definitely consider subscribing because there's going to be a whole lot more where these babies came from.